chairs who are better Cambridge. Learn how to speak into a mic just that. I live in Keys, Cambridge. There are two kids in Cambridge Public Schools as amigos. And along with Becca Scopio and one of the co-chairs of A Better Cambridge. Better Cambridge is an all-volunteer, nonprofit organization working on housing issues in Cambridge. I got to do all of fact a lot of my friends to afford to live, which I think is pretty common for folks who end up joining ABC. And we also work with Abundant Housing Massachusetts, and our moderator by Jesse Skansen-Silanop, who is the executive director of Abundant Housing in Massachusetts. And some of ABC's highlights, we all passed the 100% affordable housing overlay, as well as amendments to that overlay. And I think we are hearing 1,000 affordable homes that are in the pipeline thanks to the AHF. Heck, and that's a reminder, I blast post Colter. And, but, Jesse, the Abundant Housing Massachusetts is working statewide on household equity and housing abundance. And a quarter in the legislature, they have a YIMBY Act. He worked with the Governor Illy, on the affordable homes extra costs. And they're continuing on that front with the hearing soon on the this one way. Wednesday, next week. So you can also tune in for that. But I will start with a quick round of applause for all of our candidates who are here tonight and everyone. So the format will be 90 session introductions and then 4 minutes of Q&A for each.
I'm Hallie Galvizon. So I think many of you know my background. I know to be data-driven, for better or worse. Sometimes because I'm asking really big questions that people like. So my background is very to be cities councils of the beating noise. This is the Southern projects the same ground volatility versus jobs doing in doing the developments because it's the I would this is type of app development and hazard organization and label that and is the so related to housing. I really saw after the hours of the league first I churches GC it's being able to first like that Jesus you will maybe parking name in citywide. Steve, what else as to some of the people? In the six of the multifamily zoning, credit to my college, he compromised. He came up with something and lots of ideas. It's going to be approached. I want to say that I'm coldly excited today about the news that the governor and in court that announcement to try to increase housing across the state on something that in order to address it to even like the red tape to be seen that on the too often that's housing yield. So I look forward to the questions that you're on and happy to talk more about the other things that I've plenty of.
Real quick, and over that before you head over that, that's the yes. So I want to make sure I know folks are saying they can't hear me here. So and it just hold the mic as close as we can. Also, do just one point. So, also, I just want to point out Jay right here is our timekeeper. It will raise his hand at 30 seconds left, and then he may verbally say time is up when your time is up. So I just wanted to make sure they were all fair to that. Thank you. Go ahead now.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jesse, and to ABC for hosting this great event. My name is Ned Delance, and I'm a new candidate this year. I am a renter that lives in Cambridgeport, and I would suffice to say that my life really changed when I was able to find an apartment in Cambridge. I competed with 1900 groups. They just started out bid them with my two friends. We were able to sign a check on the day for way too much money. I went to first month's the last very closet. That was a big check, so we were put that down on the spot. I didn't even throw the place, but I moved in and I lived there since. I've just been absolutely blessed to live in this great city. I started my, sort of career as a lawyer in Boston at a big corporate law firm, really focused, just working long hours. When I lived in Cambridge, I had a big switch up. I became more publicly service minded. I became a public defender. I founded a disability law firm alongside my father. I just became really exposed, to the widespread housing insecurity that is present in this region. I started my life as a kid in Western Massachusetts at a triple decker on the second floor above my uncle's law firm, and now I'm a renter living in this city where housing costs are skyrocketing. I got my start in housing politics on an event at Wade Blighter in East Cambridge, and I've been focused on it ever since. So I really appreciate being here and the opportunity to talk about these issues that are pretty much the most pressing issues of our time, and we need solutions now, and we can't kick the can down the road. So thank you.
I'm going to stand. I'm hopefully going to bring some energy. So, hi, my name is Aya Al-Zubi, and I use the Shikar series. And I believe that we can make our city dignified and affordable for everyone. Nobody should have to worry about making rent. Nobody should have to be worried about getting around safely. And nobody should have to worry about affording food. A little bit of context about me. I was born in Jordan and immigrated to the United States with my family when I was young. And we moved around a lot growing up. I didn't really have a place I called home. And it wasn't until I came to Cambridge and felt a deep sense of community that I became dedicated to giving back. And that's part of why I ran in 2023. You might be familiar with our campaign. And we came in 10th of the 9 seats. So we're back at it again, especially right now in the time we're in under Trump's administration, to bring a relentless focus to making this vision real, to making our city dignified and affordable for everyone, whether through housing, transportation, food, and more. And I've had experience organizing on the local and on the regional level from issues related to gun violence prevention, pilot negotiations, and homelessness. And those are just a few examples. Within Cambridge, I'm a renter, and I moved around within Cambridge a lot. Whether it's due to rising rents or bad landlord experiences, or both. So in terms of if I'm elected on city council, I just want to note that something I want to work on is bringing in more tenant protections, especially right now where we're a majority of the city, and yet our city council is disproportionately homeowner.
Does this work? Hi, I'm Zayed Chair, Lady for State Council. A renter over in the fort. I get that really unique experience with both blue and white collar background. I've worked as an instrument operator for a land surveying company. I got to see a lot of issues that happen with property line disputes or issues with easements. I also have a more white collar background working in finance. I got my degrees in applied economics and management with a concentration in finance and entrepreneurship at Cornell. I think that really important moving forward, that when we address the housing issues in our city, that we are making sure that we're listening to residents, that we're listening to professionals, that we're making sure that housing that we built is the right type of housing and that's actually going to be affordable. I know that for people in my generation especially, a lot of people are feeling really discouraged because they don't think that home ownership will already be accessible. We need to make sure that that's not something that's happening consistently where people are just giving up. And I've had friends that are just under 30 years old saying, I don't know if I'll ever be able to own a home before I die. And I think it's really important that we have programs, whether it's first-time home find assistance programs or other programs that are about people can believe that it's possible and work for example. Thank you. Hi, my name is Peter Xu, and I'm a currently practicing physician. I would love to raise the standards of public health for the most vulnerable populations in Cambridge. I don't think anyone is running on a platform of public health, but I think that is a unique opportunity for Cambridge. Public health isn't just covering, taking care of meals at playgrounds or taking care of the uninsured folks. Public health also encompasses affordable house, which is near and dear to ABC. And I want to appreciate ABC for this chance to be here. I am an owner, but I sublet my other 2 rooms for, to 2 other grass humans. And, the housing price in Cambridge obviously is super high. None of my physician colleagues could just buy without even a blink. So it's not just a problem for what we call lower socioeconomic classes or middle classes, but for everyone. And I think we need more housing. We need more affordable housing. And from a public health standpoint, we need more affordable housing for the homeless folks. There are socioeconomic folks, and that's what I'm here for. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Testing, everyone. Good evening. My name is Aisha Wilson. I am a sitting counselor on the council. I also spent 4 years on the Cambridge School Committee during the pandemic. I'm a kid from Cambridge. I'm a single mom by choice to a toddler. He's 3 years old. I am also, right now, proudly to say, a homeowner. As someone who grew up in the city, who grew up in low-income public housing, grew up in Jefferson Park, I was also a Section 8 voucher holder, and I was a live-in support staff for adults who has intellectual differences for 7 years. So I had the gamut when you think about what affordable housing or just living in the city of Cambridge looks like and feels like. Now, while I was afforded the opportunity to have my lived experience be here in Cambridge, I often wondered if I would be continuing to raise my child here in the city with the high cost of rent, with the cost of childcare, etc. So a lot of things that I focus on, and I don't know if I said I'm a social worker as well, but I think about the care of our communities. I think about making sure that each and every one of our members of our community have all of their needs met. I want to focus on the most vulnerable. I want to make sure that we are intentional to make sure that we meet their needs, because by meeting their needs, we're going to meet everyone's needs. I want to thank you all so much. Thank you, AUC. Look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Mark McGovern. I'm running for re-election. I have served 6 terms on the council, 4 terms on the school committee before that. I'm also a social worker with 30 years of experience working with children and families. Since we're going to talk about housing, I grew up in a home that my great-grandparents purchased in 1918. It's right out that window. And I'm incredibly lucky, because if not for them, I wouldn't be able to afford to live here. And a story that I don't typically tell is that my parents divorced when my mother was about 24 years old with 3 kids. And we were on welfare, got food assistance, food stamps. The needle exchange over here used to be where we went to pick up our food stamps. And I don't talk about that as much because at the end of the day, I always had a home and a roof over my head because of my great-grandparents, because I was lucky. Being housed shouldn't rely on luck. It shouldn't rely on what family you were born into. Everybody deserves an affordable place to live. And as Peter said, housing is key. Your educational outcomes are better. Your mental health outcomes are better. Your physical health outcomes are better. Your job outcomes are better. Everything is better when you have the stability of an affordable place to live. Everybody in Cambridge deserves that. I'm proud that I have been a leading voice on all the progressive housing policy that has passed since I joined this council 12 years ago, and I'm going to keep doing it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dennis, for those opening statements. We're going to get into the follow-up question in just 1 second. A little bit of housekeeping so folks know. I'm sure everyone has been to this, the Senior Center many times, but bathrooms are down the hall and to the left. We have water over at the pizza to help yourself to pizza. And the drinking fountain is near the bathrooms. And there are cups, I believe, called at the pizza and at the registration table. Folks probably noticed that there are only 7 candidates right now. We will have a second round with 8 candidates after the set candidates with the same formats. I'm going to ask each candidate a couple questions. I'll start with one each, and they'll have 4 minutes answer. If there's more time in those 4 minutes, I may ask a follow-up question. These questions are mostly drawn from their responses to the rather extensive ABC candidate questionnaire, which is on the ABC website. If folks have not seen those questionnaires yet, I would definitely encourage you to check those out on the ABC website, abettercambridge.org. So that is why some of the questions may be drawing from information that was not necessarily mentioned in their opening statements, but it is based on of the answers that they provided in writing. So we're going to start the other caddy that will go down the line. Again, I'll ask the question, and they'll have 4 minutes to answer. Hattie, as you know, the next council will handle, several rezonings, Central Square, North Mass Ave, and Cambridge Street from Michigan to Inman. You stated in your questionnaire that the Cambridge Street and North Mass Ave proposals you stated that in the Cambridge Street and North Mass Ave proposal, you believe that heights above 6 stories should require setbacks. Can you explain your rationale for that and whether it is a worthy trade-off if it ends up limiting housing supply in those corridors, which you also said is beneficial?
So this may be a short answer because I probably misspoke, but if I step backs just like 5 feet at the 6-story level, could that dramatically change the streetscape? It's really that urban design. And whether it's at 6 stories or 8 stories, if you just go down NASDAQ, a building even 18 stories looks way different just with 5 feet back the 6-story level, which means the people in the city would be more amenable to high heights. Does that?
Yep, you great. Thank you.
You use setbacks. Is this okay? Can you hear me now? No. No? Right now, is that sound?
All is slow.
I'll practically eat it.
You walk through these streets and turns, but
So, how much time?
it's okay.
Okay, so you also said in your questionnaire that you may be open to supporting the state bill limiting some rent increases, but that you were concerned about some unintended consequences. Can you elaborate on what you anticipate might be some of the unintended consequences of limiting rent increases and how we might still be able to implement affordable housing policies while overcoming these unintended consequences?
So it's this question of whether it's rent control or rent stabilization, because rent control is not, in my view, does not have a record necessarily doing what we want just to provide more affordable housing. It sometimes helps a very small number of people and defeats more identification. But rent stabilization is a different category. So that's why then I wasn't sure what the time was. And the unintended consequences may be what we saw sometimes in Anchorage, which is people who didn't need the affordable housing getting the affordable housing, and also a disinvestment in the infrastructure, which led to unintended consequences that we would like. Is that
Yeah.
And the other thing is, whatever we do, we don't want an owner's bureaucracy that ends up taking a lot of money or costing a lot of money in order to.
Sure. 2 minutes.
All right.
I care.
Yeah, I was not expecting this. One other statement in your response, you stated that's what is missing all the talk about housing affordability in Cambridge is the need for better paying jobs, absolutely. If people made adequate income, they could afford housing costs. Can you explain how you would tackle this under the powers of the city council?
Well, that is an issue. I mean, the city council can affect the housing for the whole region, which we all talk about. What we can do and what the state can do is do a much more intentional job of effective job training. We know that is how people do a lot of poverty. That is how people get access to other jobs. So when I say you look at it, housing affordability, everyone had an income that could afford the housing in Cambridge, you literally wouldn't have prices. Oh, that sounds kind of cliche. It's actually a deep understanding of the economic inequality in our society that has led to the situation our housing in Cambridge is unaffordable to people, because we have this skewing of folks making $20,000 a year and then people making $500,000 a year. There just shouldn't be so many billionaires and millionaires able to do what they do without a living wage for the, is that, I mean, I truly believe that. So you asked what the Cambridge City Council would do. I think we can really assess and look at all of our job training programs and do a much more comprehensive look at how effective they are and what else did you do. And we have a jobs training, which I know that councils looked at to have a linkage fee specifically dedicated to job training. And that's kind of thing that you really seeking in order to put more resources into that in order to uplift a lot of poverty instead of concentrating on poverty on a base body. Only to be subsidized on from that. Great. You do better. Okay. Is that it? You got a minute.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, okay, then I'll ask you a general question. Well, I know, just curious, given that the multiple rezones that will be above before the council in the next term, generally, how would you approach your thinking on new rezones?
Rezones at Owani Berry School I really look to the city and all of us to look at how it is that we can use that rezoning to produce the kind of housing we want. I think one of the issues with the multi-county zoning, which I did both for, and it was a compromise that, again, I'm grateful my colleagues worked on, but it's not ideal. And part of that is because
But people recognize you go along NASA Ave, it shouldn't be any place where there's a single-story building. Because if we just built those up to even just 6 stories, we keep planning so much more housing. And that's how I'd be looking to assess these rezonings. I think it's a really great idea to have the squares and the quarters at this differential. Now, over is at 36. So it's 36. So then I'll just say, because I know this graph, I'm not sure. I mean, it's all on Muzzy. The AHO was one of those really challenging ones. A really great question on yours thing was, well, would you do anything different? What I did on the AHO was propose 3 changes. 1, to follow our sustainability goals. The climate crisis is the existential crisis of our generation. Nothing else matters. Affordable housing, economic equality, you can don't adjust that. I asked for that to be included. And middle income 20%, and neither of those were included in that, unfortunately, yet. Now all talking about that.
Hi, Ned. In your questionnaire, you talked about the moral obligation to build more housing in which to fight climate change. Can you tell us more about why building housing in Cambridge is important for climate change?
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. So, and that you did just touch on this a little bit, but I think I would change a little bit what you said. So, I think housing and building dense transit-oriented housing is a first-order issue in solving the climate crisis. Plastic or wood straws or whatever, that's not going to solve the climate crisis. Even how we address our energy mix is, in my opinion, not quite as important as whether we're able to build transit-oriented housing, live densely in the places where the jobs are, where people want to be. And that's simply because a lot of emissions come from transportation, automobile transportation, logistics. The suburban experience, as we know, has failed in spreading out our population and relying on large automobiles and large trucks, move all our goods, move all our people to get people to work. That's resulted in tons and tons of carbon emissions that this led to climate crisis as we see today. So the only way to really get around that is to build densely around transit so people don't need to rely on automobiles and carbon-based transportation. We need to be able to rely on sustainable transportation, sustainable logistics, walking, and there's so many knock-on health effects. I don't hear mention the public health effects. Well, the healthiest thing that you can do for yourself right now is to live in a walk city. You look at, someone who lives in Cambridge or somebody who lives out in suburbs, and the health effects are just amazing. It's just walking around will save your life rather than, all these miracle drugs that we develop here at Cambridge. So it really is a moral obligation to build more housing in Cambridge, because if we don't build housing in Cambridge, that means it gets built somewhere else. And where is somewhere else? Somewhere else is, I don't know, maybe Texas. Maybe it's, a suburban development in Texas. I could go on a rant about that because I don't know if people looked at the census data, but the blue states are losing seats. And the federal government is going to be red for a really long time. Blue states don't start built. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but, I guess it ties into the moral obligation because, those folks we call government right now are too keen on solving the climate crisis. So it really is a multi-dimensional problem, but it all starts with building densely around transit in places like Central Square or Square.
Thanks. I was curious, in your questionnaire, you mentioned Chicago's Green Social Housing Ordinance. Can you tell us exactly what that is and why you think it would be a good idea for Cambridge to do something similar? How would it with Verdner?
Yeah, definitely. And I won't pretend to be an expert on this, but I have researched it a little bit. Essentially, it's a social housing revolving fund of sorts. And I'll try not to get too specific, so I'll probably mess something up. But essentially, at its core, it's the city funding public housing, whether that's true public housing, like a public housing project that's entirely city-owned, or it's something more like subsidized inclusionary zoning, where the city is paying for the affordable units within a market rate building. The city of Chicago, other cities in Montgomery County, Maryland has done this. Other cities around the country, other cities around the world, like Austria, have some form of social housing or funded affordable development in their city. And basically, they care some sustainability requirements too around building, passive house or other environmental friendly building regulations. But they're using public funds to pay for those affordable units, which I think is really important to me because we did beg and plead the market to build affordable units, but my own experience in my life is that the market's just going to do what the market's going to do. So if you want affordable units, we have to build them, we have to fund them. But at the end of the day, it's just another tool in the toolkit. It's not going to be the one thing that solves the housing crisis. It's going to be one of many. We can't just try to rely on social housing or this sort of revolving fund, but it is a really good tool.
Thank you.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. So in your questionnaire, you've talked about your challenges as a renter and in your intro as well, renter in Cambridge. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and how, that impacted your platform and how your proposals would address some of the challenges that you and other renters have faced?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as I mentioned earlier in my intro, I've actually moved around a lot in Cambridge. And in that way, I've been a nomad my entire life. I have moved at least 5 times over the 7 years that I've lived here. It's either connected to rising rents or bad landlords or both. In fact, last year, my landlord did not provide heating. My landlord did not provide cooling. And I was at a point where I had to push and advocate for myself, and our tenants within our complex actually came together to strategize how we can actually advocate for ourselves because you weren't living in habitable conditions. My story is not a unique story. There are other people who are living in situations where they feel like they are not heard and their landlords are taking advantage of that. So part of what I would want to do on City Council is bring in more proposals to advance tenant protections. Whether that's pushing our municipal voucher program that we just started recently while advocating against the closure of a homeless shelter. Yeah, that's right. We closed the homeless shelter, which is another part of our platform on our campaign is to open a new one. And the second is also bringing in an emergency rental assistance programs for any renters facing evictions or need support with moving in and moving out, especially with condo conversions, which we need to strengthen as well. We need a move in and move out guide into how to introduce yourself to the city. And also when you're on your way out, when your time has come and you feel like exploring another city. Because the reality is Cambridge is not just homeowners. There is a transit community here that we have to be able to advocate for. And a unique part about our campaign is, and that kind of talked about this, that I want to take it a step further. Because let's paint the picture of where we've been in Cambridge on housing. Over the past 20 years, we have built over 10,000 units in Cambridge. That's incredible. We've also made progress on things like the affordable housing overlay. We've also recently ended exclusionary zoning and passed the multifamily zoning reform. We also have the alewife quadrangle rezoning. So our city is making progress on zoning. But the strange part about it is that rents are still increasing. I just moved 2 weeks ago and I'm a city council candidate. It was brutal. And our campaign believes centrally that trickle-down economics may work in the short term, but definitely not in the long term. So our campaign wants to bridge a new lane when we talk about the housing crisis, because we cannot continue to solely lean on the same forces that brought us in this housing crisis in the first place. And that includes restricting biotech expansions and hotel expansions. But most importantly, we need to center communities of color. In our city, we have had a Riverside community get pushed out and gentrified by Harvard as an institution. And we know that to be the case in Alston as well. We've seen Kendall Square impact the court community as well. So by centering communities of color, we can bring in an innovative solution that actually uplifts everybody. And Ned kind of spoke to it, but I'm going to push it further and say it's social housing. And the idea behind social housing and why it's actually such a good idea is that it takes our AAA bond rating, which, by the way, we're one of very few cities in the United States that has this. It brings it and utilizes it to build housing that not only builds deeply affordable housing, but also low-income, middle-income housing, and market-rate housing. So it brings in all forms of housing and helps people not only keep their roots in this community, but also build roots in this community if they want to stay here longer. The other pieces are on rent control, and I hope to work with ABC if I'm elected. And then I'd probably leave the last at building a new Polish shelter, because we do need as other non-congregate shelter that offers medicine and food to unhoused.
There you go, Kenny. So do you give longer answer? Do you only have to have one question? Hi, Zai. I know where you're doing that.
Good. In your responses, you stated that one way to strike a balance between preserving Cambridge's people and its historical buildings would be to create more incentives for historic homes to be converted into co-ops, giving residents budget ownership and stability. Could you please expand on that proposal? How would it be funded and scaled to meet the housing needs
in a high-demand city like Cambridge?
Yeah. So when it comes to living with people, I went to school at Cornell. We have lots of products. We also have Greek life, so groups that have housing. Overall, people just seem to really like living amongst each other. I think that it's something that a lot of times zoning regulations or requirements on housing can actually decrease that. When I was in school, we had a shared kitchen. We absolutely loved being able to do that for the social component. I think that's really important, especially for young people, to be able to connect with other people. There's a social crisis going on where a lot of people are saying that they don't have friends. And that's happening for a lot of people in that 20 to 30 age category, and people that are also aging that happen to cross the spectrum. So I think that it would be really beneficial for the city and its residents if we had systems in place where individuals have wanted to start nonprofit that would allow a co-op like situation where the city could provide funding. Like you mentioned, we have a AAA rating. I think that's really good to be able to utilize that towards making it so that we have lower interest rates in those sort of organizations to kind of put down roots in Cambridge.
Great. Also, in your questionnaire, you wrote that you supported leveraging the city's bond rating to secure loans so that nonprofits can build 100% affordable housing. But you also stated that the only type of housing you support are ADUs and triple deckers in order to maintain neighborhood character. If affordable housing nonprofits can only build up to 3 units at a time, which would be less cost effective for them, they may stop working here altogether. Is that a trade-off you would find acceptable?
So I would say that that was a mischaracterization of what I said. What I was saying is that I would support that by right. So when it comes to residential properties, if you're taking out a loan, a residential property is considered 1 to 4 units. And I think that having by right development for those type of units makes sense. When we pulled a multifamily zoning, when we took away a lot of the requiredness, a lot of the oversight in planning for it, we need to make sure that we're really having proper oversight for big apartment developments. So it's not that I only support developments that are 3 stories of 4 units. It's that if we're going to do a by right, you not consider issues like if they're green roof, but is that going to cut down every tree in Cambridge? Because green roofs are great, but they don't really work for bunnies or for bees, right? Is there 6 stories up? So we want to make sure that we're creating the system where the by right component is limited to actual residential properties and that commercial properties have proper oversight.
Would that apply to affordable housing, or do you support the current affordable housing over it?
So when it comes to affordable housing, I'm much more, I'm willing to know higher than I would be by right for a commercial property. I do think that it's regional dependent. I think that what is great about Cambridge is different neighborhoods. Every neighborhood has a different charm to it. And then we want it sensitive towards the neighborhood. So I don't think zoning by the citywide as whole is ever a good option. That said, when it comes to affordable housing, I definitely do support a higher by right standard than I would market rate.
All right, thank you. In your view, how does Cambridge balance the trade-off between historic preservation and the need to build our homes?
Perfect question. When it comes to building homes, I think we have to consider the environment. We're incentivizing destroying existing buildings to build higher. Yes, it's great from a transit perspective, but as someone who's been on construction sites, I can tell you not economic building is not great for the environment. There's a lot of emissions that happen. There's a ton of equipment that goes on. The average person probably hasn't spent a lot of time on the construction site. There might be a couple of contractors out there that have a lot more time than me. But generally speaking, people don't really see those facts. So when it comes to buildings, there's a lot of buildings that are large existing buildings that could be built on the back. We could take areas that have a backyard, be able to build an extra couple of units, and also dividing some of the big homes. So there's people that have big homes that want to be able to divide it into 2 or 3 different units so that they could have their children or grandchildren live there, or have their parent come in, but allow them to still have some independence in their own unit. So I support zoning like that. Those are the part of multi-family zoning that I do support. There's parts that I do support, but it's really the stuff that focuses on yield residential properties, not deciding commercial properties as multi-family residential developments.
All right, thank you, Ben.
Can I take like 12 seconds to say I also am very against bringing down the 20% down? I've heard multiple people talk about how market rate, we want to reduce that percentage. I think that's the only thing that we actually gain from the multi-family overlay. So I think that, so I think that's really important that we keep that.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. So in your response to the questionnaire, you stated that we can and should prioritize impact residents in certain occasions like tutors, nurses, firefighters, social workers, case managers,
police veterans, etc., for inclusionary housing units. Given the constraints like decreasing federal dollars, as well as fair housing law and more, how would you determine which occupations would qualify and craft a legal city program to achieve this goal?
I think that's gonna be a very complicated answer. I think every occupation is all for liberties. I mean, the occupation is local. And so in order to come up with the list of or what we kind of recommend in terms of the occupations that we would prioritize, I think that's gonna be a group discussion. That's gonna be that's gonna be involving all the citizens or chance of riches on this. I think the bottom line is we know that we can having a housing crisis for every single election term, like for every Cambridge City Council election. We talked about housing crisis and stuff, and we built a lot as a city. I think we've done a great job as a city. To be very frank, and the bottom line is it's still not enough. And the bottom line is, I wish I had a magic pill, but the bottom line is no matter what we do, or even to the best we do, we're probably not going to be able to satisfy all the house. And so then the question becomes, how do we prioritize what we need to do? A similar kind of example, or that I give to voters would be, I'm a physician. I have 24 hours in my life, and I know you guys have 24 hours of your life too. But when I'm on duty, and there are, say, if I need to spend an hour on a patient, and there are more patients than I can see in the shift, I have to prioritize. I have to say who probably will die first. That's not necessarily the push, but I have to take care of those folks first. And sort of with the occupation theme over here, or cancer bridges, a burst, is that I would love to have everyone else. I would love to trust. I just don't think that's gonna be feasible. So how does our city prioritize who and what kind of occupations and all those kind of stuff? I think that's gonna be a group discussion.
Thank you. What do you think are important aspects to consider when defining the cutoff for historic housing? You mentioned in your questionnaire response homes built up to 1950 or the 1950s. Are there other factors that you would consider when defining what is historic?
I think the bottom line of that is that that is also going to be something that we are going to talk to experts and professionals in terms of defining historic, because there is similar to medicine in life. We want to achieve some kind of balance, and the balance is more housing, neighborhood preservation, and so I think the balance to and how do we make Cambridge better in terms of housing. So in terms of years of cutoff for historic buildings, I personally, it's probably going to be the range between 75 to 100 years in terms of buildings. But what exactly that cutoff is, I think that has to kind of take a look at the city's needs in terms of how many houses are we trying to project to build, along with different neighborhoods, and then also developers to be here.
Given the multiple rezonings that will be before the council by the next term, this council or how you will approach each one in the France council. What are the priorities that you would use to approach those rezonings?
In general, I favor building big and tall along the main arteries of Cambridge. And then in terms of different neighborhoods, I do think that we should respect every neighborhood's kind of input. How we do that, I think is that we should have some kind of review board for those neighborhoods. And the bottom line is not to curtail the amount of buildings that we could do. Is to, if we build tall and big in certain neighborhoods, that's probably going to block the solar panels on the neighboring houses. And it also has the potential to cut down the excessive trees, especially the big ones. Those all have public health effects. And what I can say is, on the last 30 seconds, is that public health is really the main focus. All right, thank you very much.
Dude.
Yeah, well, how are you?
Great.
So in your questionnaire response, you stated that you're not 100% sure yet on
the placement of the phone in investment of the phone with anxiety. Sorry for that. All right.
Thank you. It's an extra to capture me. I should make it first.
Sorry again, your candidate, in your response to the questionnaire, the ABC, you say that they're not 100% sure yet on how you would like to see Central Square rezoned and would need more information. Can you explain the type of information you would need to determine whether 8 stories on Mass Ave and 8 stories in the surrounding area would be acceptable?
Yes, thank you for the question. And, I would say there was quite a few community conversations when the Massenet building was created. Not everyone was excited in the community. I attended quite a bit of those meetings. And, I want to appreciate the community input that we had across the city. And I also want to name that I'm not afraid of heights, right? Like I grew in Jefferson Park, right next door to Bridge Towers, where a lot of my friends live. I spent many days and even nights with them. So again, I'm not afraid of height, but what I am worrying about is not investing in community input and really thinking about how we engage our public around these conversations. So a couple of neighborhood groups and organizations put together sometime last year to discuss this, to really talk about what would this look like and how to be come together around the rezoning, such as where making sure the having input. And overwhelmingly, there wasn't a lot of happiness when it came to this tall, 18-story building, a crossing loss, it's just where. Now we know such as where it can hold them, like it makes it happen. But we also want to make sure that we're bringing our community along in the conversation. So really think about what does that look like. Not every parking lot should go up to 18 stories unless it's 100% affordable housing. Making sure that we're not reducing our inclusionary, so that we're also maximizing on 20%, if not greater. I know that might be difficult to get to, but I would love to see us get greater inclusionary number beyond the 20%. But also even what folks you talk about is the social housing. Should also maximize on more affordability there and making sure that more folks across socioeconomic as are able to live together in bills and create community within each other. So last thing I'm not 100% sure is because our community is not finishing. While I value and believe that height is important, I also value our community input and that is pretty important in terms of how do you keep forward with the features such as square as well as all.
Thank you. I want to follow up on the social housing keys. I know a few candidates asked it. But you're the one who have a little more time up right now. How does Cambridge pay for? Cambridge is a wealthy city relative to most others, but these difficult times, federal funding. How do we pay for that? Or other social program?
This is a great question and one that we have to continue to challenge ourselves with in terms of power prioritizing where our dollars are going. We can't do everything in this wealthy city because dollars are tight. However, what you talk about and people talk about this in introduction around the quality of life, the public health crisis, when you have a home, your roof over your head, the extra things that you're able to do with your might are feasible. Thinking capping. Your quality of just how do you show up to go to school, how do you go to work, the food that you have on your table. When you have a roof on your head, things help a hustle. And we want to make sure that we are dating and will the town to the top of our city because we want the possibilities to be here for our neighbors, for our future neighbors of Cambridge, because that is what social housing should look like. And that is truly what Cambridge is. Cambridge is about community, but oftentimes there are decisions that are being made that are not often intrusive of the community. And that's where we are finding that disconnect. And that's where more and more voices are being upright, which is a disservice to public service. And that's why I vow on making sure that we are inclusive of our community, make sure that input is there. And when I often speak, I'm talking about our sixth grader to adore projects on housing, up to our elders who are worrying about aging and
Mark.
So, in your questionnaire, that's not easy.
I was used. I'm glad you changed the picture. If I'd work hard to get down to 2 chins, so costly. Better thing.
In your questionnaires, you mentioned building housing on city-owned blocks to Central Square. That possibility has been on the table for some time now, possibly every term you've been on the council. What has to happen to get shovels in the ground building that housing in the next terms?
Yeah, it's great. That's a great question, and it has been something we've been talking about for quite a few years. I think right now there are RFPs that are out there looking at asking developers to put proposals on what they would do on those sites. There's obviously a lot of conversation about are they going to mix income sites or 20% inclusionary, or will they be fully affordable sites? My preference would be that they be fully affordable sites. The challenges with that is that some of the funding is different, right? And so if Justice Star, for example, said, we could do a 5-story building and build 40 units of 100% affordable, but then a private developer at 20% could build 70 units of affordable, maybe just, then you have this question of, would you rather the fewer units because it's a nonprofit, or would you take the 30 additional units and be willing to work with the for-profit developer? And so those are conversations that we have to have. We have talked about the social housing. I just want to say, and I have had some discussion, and I've been working in the Housing Justice Coalition to have a policy order that's ready to go on starting the process of having the city really take a look at social housing and what would it take to go down that road. We really require calling out the money and using our AAA bond rating to our advantage for that. So again, to get shovels in the ground, we need to get these proposals in. We need to make some decisions, or need to make zoning changes. And I support the conversation around community input. I also know that sometimes in Cambridge, it take a very long time, and so at some point, you have to make a decision, right? And so I live in Central Square. I see Mass and May, every day. I still think it's a much better building than what was there before, and it houses a whole lot of people, including a whole lot of low-income people. And so, that brought up the impact on the environment by building more density. It's also better for small businesses, right? Bullet's Cleaners, my dry cleaner around the corner. Forget driving it from another community, though, Kim. No one's coming from North Cambridge to go, right? But another 1,000+ people living in Central Square, many of whom need dry cleaning. He's the only dry cleaner in the neighborhood. He's going to do well, right? More people buying pizzas, more people going out to the restaurants, right? This is good. Density works in a whole lot of different ways, and I understand, about the neighborhood characteristics, but we also have to understand why that happened, right? And the history of zoning in this country, and in this city, is not always something that we should be terribly proud of. If certain neighborhoods were deemed as desirable, certain neighborhoods were deemed as not desirable, the not desirable neighborhoods were the ones closest to the industry and closest to the factories. That's where most of the density went. Not all, but a lot of it went. And that's what is called exclusionary zone. So, yes, we have to be respectful, but you're too small a city to say certain neighborhoods are going to be protected from building more houses. We'll never reach our goals.
37. What? I'm not such.
I'm not time for early boys.
One Central Square resident, how do you approach the proposed rezoning in Central Square? Would you support up to 18 stories in the square and 8 stories in the surrounding area?
Yes.
All right. We're going to go to the next round. We'll have to give a round of applause to...
I thank you, everyone. We will get started with our second panel here. Fortunately, we're not sure Mayor Simmons will be able to make it, dealing with the concerning issue around an ICE apprehension in Cambridge. But we'll do those. Could you repeat that? Mayor Simmons is not here because she's dealing with this ICE apprehension. I understand happened in Cambridge today. And with that, requesting to start our second table.
Just so you all know how it works, we're going to give you 90-second intros, introduce yourself, whatever you'd like to say. We'll go down the line. When we're done, we'll come back and I will ask a question or two or three of each of you. About 4 minutes in total to answer the question. We'll just go back down the line. And that'll be it. So, Stanislav, we will be doing you.
Hold on. I'll give you a notice at 30 seconds. My arm raised. Let me get 30 seconds left. Miniature has. I will tell you to stop and move on. I figure I'm is the way line.
Sounds good.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Stanislav Bricken. I'm running Cambridge City Council for playing for work and lower families across the city. You don't hear me?
Zoom out. Area. Okay. So for 15 years, I dedicated my career to the spike, supporting others, teaching thousands of students and building programs to prepare a future. Everyone on this stage, or I guess actually we're sitting in a semicircle here on the ground, agrees that affordability is a problem here in Cambridge. But primary difference between us is what solutions we're advocating for. I don't think an honest conversation about affordability can be had without talking about equality. The fact that Cambridge is one of the most unequal communities in the country. I think there's a lot of times we'll go avoid talking about this at City Council, and if I'm elected, we're not going to be able to shut me up. If we believe that a better version of Cambridge must include our low-income residents, then direct public intervention to battle inaffordability and inequality, such as social housing, community land trusts, municipal vouchers, food assistance, and childcare, must be part of the solution. Nothing offered by the private market will help a single person making less than $57,000 per year. They don't even qualify for the vouchers. And the private market alone will do nothing to keep homeless shelters open or to fund assistance programs like Rise Out. As an immigrant who grew up in a very low-income household, this fight is personal to me. Your time is up. So,
Yeah, as a reminder, we will ask you to hold your applause. We'll give a chance to applause everyone at the end. Go ahead, everyone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paramana Z. I'm a city councilor here. Finishing up my second term. I'm chair of the housing. Hi, my name is Paramana Z. I'm a Cambridge City Councilor here, finishing up my second term. I really had talked about, in all four of my elections to speak of fourth election, about cost of living, specifically the biggest budget item on everyone's budget line, which is housing, right? How can we get more affordable housing of all types for all people of all income, and really try to move like the biggest needle within that, right? So originally, when I was so selected, we passed the legislation that removed parking mandates for all uses across the city. Then we expanded the affordable housing overlay. This year, we just finished expanding our multifamily housing. And what's important and critical about all of those is that they really move the needle, such that we now have thousands of affordable units in the pipeline. We have thousands of units for all sorts of renters, including legalized triple-deckers and affordable apartments for the first time. And it's really, really moved the needle in a significant way. And so what I think is that we're a team on City Council. Everyone kind of has their own focuses. Some have a broader scope, both like details. And my focus is on really how can we move the needle in terms of our zoning policy to make sure that we're building houses of all types that the number one thing, the thing that most people spend most of their money on, rent, or, buy a house, more affordable.
Hi everyone, my name is Sambol Sandiki. I'm another council since committee, running a re-election, still continue our work around policy reform and constituent services. What led me to this work has really been my lived experience in affordable housing. I've run in the Rich Towers and the Roosevelt Towers, so that shapes the work that I do. I've worked on the council twice now as co-chair of the housing committee, working on zoning reform, working on strengthening tenant protections. A lot of the work I've also done has been around achieving access to home ownership programs and making those stronger. I think overall we have so much of the city that is a priority, and housing and helping people day to day, whether that's helping them improve the conditions of their units currently to providing more access is something that you have to work day to day. As a former legal aid attorney, I've also worked to make sure our legal service providers have what they need, because tenant protection, eviction protection is really, really critical to making sure that people have their access to rights. I was a sponsor at Oaky Ridge, all tenants ordinance that gives notice to our tenants. And so, that'll end, but it's an honor to serve. Thank you.
Thanks for organizing the support for Anika Steinbolster, and I'm a longtime renter in Cambridge. But Bodhi, so you're out there. Louder? Yeah. Opa? Okay. All right. Louder. Got it. Bust the mic. Okay, I'll leave the mic. Okay. I'm Dana Ballester. I'm a longtime renter at Cambridge. I've been here for more than 10 years in Boston area. Native. I went to Wellesley College. I studied computer science, and afterwards I studied economics and development policy at a program at MIT. Right now I am getting my PhD in policy design. So I'm very passionate about this, but mostly I just love Cambridge a lot, and I'm very committed to this community. I'm board chair of our local YWCA Cambridge, and which provides vital affordable housing as well as other programming in our community. And I'm also a member of the city's commercial parking city. And so housing and transportation are very touristical to me, both as a renter and as someone who doesn't have access to a car. I rely entirely on our city's public transit as well as our MIC infrastructure. But I'm here because I want to do what I can to help the council fulfill its potential to truly serve all our residents. And I think you should do our best, not just to achieve our values, but to really follow through with our policies that are ethic. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Louise Bend, and I am not a long-term resident here, but I am a long-term public official, elected official in Massachusetts. I have actually helped the community build housing, and I have actually built housing, 28 units of housing with 6 partners in my own account. I am here because I believe that government has to be accountable, but it's not passing laws. Laws do not build housing. Developers build housing. We need to find out how to unstick the pipeline of housing that is up here. The affordable housing overlay was a great idea, and 2,062 units have been built. There are 459 currently under construction and many more in the pipeline. But we expected and envisioned to get 12,500 units built by 2030. Do you think we're going to do that? So far, we built 6,000. It's going to be a long stretch. We've got to figure out how we're going to incentivize the people who actually build housing. And yes, we are going to have to respect the incredible neighborhoods that have developed here, relationships that people have with their neighbors. I live in East Cambridge, a fairly new neighborhood with all kinds of housing, and we all have something in common. We all go to the same restaurants. We all enjoy music out in Cambridge Crossing. So it's not impossible to have mixed housing and to be able to create a community out of that.
My name is Jeevan Sobrino Wheeler, and I'm serving my second term on the Cambridge City Council. I'm the son of a single mom, and we depended on affordable housing and affordable childcare when I was growing up. And I'm running for re-election to the City Council to make sure that more folks have access to these things. At Cambridge, I'm a renter. I've gotten a rent increase just about every single year that I've lived in Cambridge, and I've had so many friends who are teachers or nonprofit workers get priced out of the city because of housing costs and then still have to commute back into their jobs here. I have dedicated my life to working on these issues. Before I was on the council, I worked at a nonprofit in Cambridge called the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. And I've also worked with the Progressive Advocacy Group of the Working Families Party, advocating at legislatures across New England for more funding for affordable housing and childcare, for better debtor protections. On the council, I have been proud to co-sponsor the affordable housing overlay and help get it across the finish line when it stalled the previous term. Also excited about the work we've done this term to end exclusionary zoning and allow more triple-leggers like the one I live in to be built across the city with their BBC van. I'm also extremely proud to have led the work to end forced brokers' fees because no one should have to pay a month's rent just to rent an apartment.
finally, I'll say I need the number one vote. I lost my first re-election. It could happen again. So if it's what you care about, I need your support on November 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Just as a reminder, I will ask you some questions. You'll have 4 minutes to respond. The audience knows, but just so you go, these questions are drawn in large part from your answers to the ADC candidate questionnaire. I may ask some question based on your intro statements or other general questions as well. And just to point out to the audience, there are 2 seats up here. One's obviously for Mayor Simmons. The A1, I believe, is the number, was for another candidate that may still come. And if they do come, you will seat that. So I'll start with you again, Stanislav. You stated in your questionnaire response that striking the right balance between preserving Cambridge's people, you state that regarding striking the right balance between preserving Cambridge's people and its historical buildings, how will private development not displace folks earning 50% AMI? To clarify, are you stating that this is a criteria that the Historical Commission should consider, and are they the right body to make that determination?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the vote is definitely out of context, though. So that was a response to a question that was asked about whether I would make all the historical commission decisions fairly advisory. So that's what that was in response to. And what I said was, no, we can't simply have all historical commission decisions, especially when there are already court buildings. There might be neighborhoods that the historical commission wants to preserve. We can't. I'm not just going to blanketly say that we should ignore their judgments on that. So that was a response to. Obviously, we here at Cambridge have some of the oldest and most pigmented history in this country. I don't believe that it's in anyone's interest to tear it up. I also don't think we have to tear it up in order to build more housing. So I think that this is really a question of how much are we going to plan for housing. I think this is one of the reasons why I prefer public alternatives to building houses, things like social housing, community land trusts, because these mechanisms allow for us to be able to pick and choose precisely where housing might go that makes more sense, and make sure that housing is actually permanently affordable and isn't just destroying historical landmarks and then ultimately going to be market rate limits.
Thank you. In your answer to the question about Cambridge Street and North Mass Ave zoning proposals, you stated that we need to make sure the zoning encourages considerable affordable housing. Given that the AHO is already on the post, what else would you do to encourage considerable affordable housing in usually buildings?
Well, I think there's a lot of conversation about moving the inclusionary percentage 20%, 10%, or down to 0. I am very much against that. I think one of the reasons that we struck the deal that we did back in February is the fact that this is going to add affordable units to our city. And to now go back on that promise feels like a little bit of a stab in the back. And as I said in my introduction, we are not talking about the folks below 50% AMI. Even these questions have nothing to do with folks below 50% AMI, right? And so it's amazing how these folks just are invisible in this conversation and where they're going to be able to find their housing. So that's where I would prefer. I would prefer deeply affordable housing. And I'm not sure that the inclusionary units are going to be able to provide that, certainly not as they're structured now. Social housing would, potentially. Community land trusts could, potentially. The housing vouchers that we advocated that the city council pass, and they did this spring, they could, potentially, if we expand those programs. But that's only going to happen if we're having a realistic conversation about income inequality of the city. And I think that collectively we're really allergic to that conversation.
How do you pay for that?
Taxes. We have the lowest residential tax rate of any city in the area, by a mile. And everybody's still afraid to say it. People literally won't even touch the subject. And many of the candidates, including folks on this stage, have told me that even while they, might agree with the fact that we have to raise taxes, they don't think it's a woody political issue. And I think that as a progressive city and as a rural progressive, mostly progressive vote side soon, people will understand that in order to be able to help people at the bottom of the income ladder, in order to be able to provide social services, the wealthy should be able to pay their fair share. And I think that applies to Cambridge as it does federally, and someone needs to have the courage at this thing of mine, City Council of the say. Oh, any more questions, sir? I can also grab.
Well, For you, how does Cambridge balance the trade-off between historic preservation and building more housing? You started to address it, but
Yeah, I think I think the power of the historical commissions as they're currently operating is perfectly fine. I don't have an issue with it. Of course, there are times when historical commissions are used. I think to slow down projects. I understand that. I think part of that is also because there hasn't really been a lot of socializing of the idea of zoning in areas where there's incredible opposition to it. And as a result, you have this opposition manifesting itself in all these mechanisms to block housing. I actually think that had there been a little bit more of an honest conversation about what inclusionary units are supposed to build, they're not going to build people at affordable housing. They're going to build housing for upper middle class people like 9 is up. Thank you.
thank you.
So that's level.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Captain. You will have 90 seconds to introduce yourself.
I hear.
You got Holocaust, so you about.
Okay. Hello there. Hi, I'm Kat. Hello there. I'm Kathy CC. I'm sorry, a little bit late from another event. I am candidate for re-election to the Cambridge City Council. I am known for, I've lived in Cambridge for 3 years. I've been a civic leader in Cambridge Court for 25 years. For 15 years, I led the revitalization of Magazine Each Park, our second largest park. I initiated the restoration, or co-initiated the restoration of St. Augustine's African Orthodox Church. I started a project called Fit This House Get Top, where we turned the community into an exhibition. I watched an open space campaign, which led the city to update their open space plan. I have, and also just, what? I am a museum curator by training, a mother, a son. And my son is a CRLS graduate. I stepped up to the city council last September, sadly, because Jim Pickett, our city councilor, died in August. And it's been an honor to serve on the council. It's an endless job, an endlessly fascinating job. And I am committed to on it. Thank you.
HWs. So we'll go back to Herdan for the follow-up question.
Hi, Burhan. You wrote a response to the ABC questionnaire that you worry that 8 stories on Cambridge Street would be a dead zone for development. Can you explain your rationale in what you believe would be feasible there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so much about the social justice, right? And at least something that we made, point that we made in that conversation that sometimes you have flawed is like, how did you come to say stones, right? And it was a mix of both the politics and the practical piece of it, right? We tried at Cambridge to do a smaller zoning called the Missing Middle Petition, which was 3 stories at first, right? And everyone would say going smaller is more popular. You die, right? And it died partially because at that smaller scale, you don't get the efficiency of scale to get the inclusionary, right? Like that was 3 units, our inclusionary starts at 10, and you really need a lot of surplus before you make inclusionary pencil. And if you go higher than 6, you start getting higher per unit cost because you go to a different construction, right? Not exclusively, but by and large, that's what happened. And so, I think 6 is a great number. You're seeing a lot of prices that are at 6 for exactly this reason. It's a sweet spot in terms of per unit economics. And once you go to 8, it's kind of like a Adeto. You don't see that many projects penciled. And so I think it would be better to find numbers that, are going to deliver what people are expecting. It would be really sad to have a hard and awkward conversation about 8 stories, but then not get 8 stories and, that you feel like you disappointed the advocates who supported it, but also scared neighbors without actually delivering, that day.
Another statement in your response was that you would try and make inclusionary zoning not in your housing production by paying for it through tax abatement. Can you explain how that would work and be implemented?
Yeah, so I think that there's been a lot of fear about inclusionary zoning, right? I would say that we did have this conversation, which was started by 2 other councilors, Councilor Toner and Councilor Nolan, in terms of the city, with Truce and Alser. And their idea was to reduce the 20% inclusionary to 10% because, that was passed at a point where we had really low interest rates, the economy was doing better, and so perhaps that those would work, numbers would work. And I'd never been a fan of that idea, especially because of what you were saying, Sam. which is that like we want as many affordable units as we can get, right? And so the question is like, okay, so you kind of have a math problem here, right? Like the financing maybe is not penciling as the exact number where we are right now. How can you make that work? Well, you have other options, which is that you can just like pay for it directly to the budget or to the affordable housing trust. I think that's also, again, hard, right? Because you're like competing against other housing initiatives. My preferred outcome is to do a tax abatement, right? Basically what that means is like you take an empty lot, for example, right? There's been a couple of developments have an empty lot. Maybe their taxes right now are, I'm making these numbers out, right? So are $100,000 a year, right? And if you did build a housing development there, they would have $200,000. So when you get nothing there, you get $100,000 in taxes. If something is built, you would get $200,000. So you can take that delta, that $100,000, and say, we will give you that to subsidize the inclusionary. But what's beautiful about this approach is if the building didn't get built, you would not debt this money. So it's money you only get if the building is built. And then you could set an aspiration date in 10 or 15 years, and then you get that full tax relief. It's how Jersey City. It's how a lot of places build housing, including Somerville. A lot of Somerville inclusionary 20% is penciling in places with the tax abatement. And I think it comes at a very little financial cost to us.
Another topic, like we see as the potential risks and benefits of possible reforms to the Historical Commission and neighborhood conservation districts.
Yeah, that's a big question. To all the zoning work I've done, I never touched the conservation of historical districts, right, myself. And that's because we are historic. There's lots of beauty in the city, lots of things that go back to pre-Civil War, pre like the founding of this country. I think that what people are seeing is that the historic conservation districts kind of served as a body and sometimes pseudo-serve to block development, not because of historical aspects, but because people want to build a house. Like 17 Story Street is a historical preservation project that is adding will build a house, but is preserving the main development itself. And the Historical Commission was really slowing it down. So I do think that we need to revisit it.
So you stated in your question and response that preservation decisions should be based on verifiable and thoughtful criteria on the well-being of the communities. Can you expand some more on what those criteria might be?
I think the fact that, we've been saying, okay, it's 50 years or older, we're going to always subject housing to a review, you deem it significant or not. I think inherent in that is, we have to reform that aspect up. And I think looking at, other criteria beyond, I think that's very kind of the way, and I get that there's an own history. I think sometimes we do a great job of that, but I think the most are things can be arbitrary and it can lead to personal preference and very discretionary. There's various examples of that. I think we can look at the historical registrar for helping us with this criteria. I don't have extreme specifics. I think we'd have to kind of do some brainstorming around that and to see where we can get through.
Thank you. But you mentioned also that building housing, you and other candidates have all mentioned this, on city-owned lots, Central Square is important. That possibility has been on the table for some time now. What will it take to actually get it to happen in the next council term?
I think we really have to think about funding. I think we have to think about why is it hard to build affordable housing. I think if they take affordable housing finance 101, that there's so many subsidies that are involved. And it's not just the city, right? It's not just the state. It's the federal government. So looking at the challenges that we have ahead, it's going to be very challenging. I think we will be we'll be seeing support or zoning coming online, right? As you mentioned, and the AG thing, Central Square is, I think, coming right after that, and making sure that we are working with our affordable housing developers on even how can we actually help them build, because the funding is a big part of this. And funding ideas, there's we mentioned some of that, but permit fees, right? What else can we do to help developers make it more feasible and cancel out? But it's just very, very hard to build housing, and especially for us.
You alluded to, or mentioned the square quarters rezoning at Central Square. Given that these will all be on the agenda for the next council, because a little bit more of your thought process and how you would approach those.
It's actually coming to us this term. We'll be talking about corridor zoning, and I think part of that, what's important, is to look at what we have done with the planning states, right? What has been looking at it? I think there are some areas that we will recommend going additionally higher. I think you have to keep in mind mixed use, mixed retail, and mixed development. I think a lot of people don't want anything. Retail's really important. How can we have both? And thinking about it, book rating got a little, insight into that zone. I think we want eye reviews, right? We want people to be, go into these businesses, but we should be intentional about, about some of that. So I think overall the approach will be to respect some of the planning processes that have gone underway with more of the Mass Hat and Cambridge Street. And then I think there will be recommendations to some areas, I think, whether that's the Cambridge Prospect, Hampshire, maybe going further up. And your Leishmere also going further up.
Okay, so in the last couple seconds this year, you quoted your response Brookings Institution. You can't beat the climate crisis without rethinking land use to extend them. What that means to you?
Yeah, I think these issues go hand in hand, and I think sometimes when you get into conversations around trade-offs, I think I'd be less building more housing, and we know this. Infill development helps our efforts, and there are so many examples, whether that's we built to pass CAD standards, to other ways that we can also do it. It's important.
I do. I think as you wrote about your questionnaire, your story about your $800 room in East Cambridge will resonate with a lot of renters. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what you would try to do to tackle Cambridge's rents, which are sadly among the highest in the United States?
Sure. So my entrance into Cambridge was that I needed to be close to one of my first jobs. And so the most affordable option was that I stayed in a room and I shared a house with 9 people who similarly needed a place to stay and did not have a lot of cash. And so that was my entrance into this city. And it was not big, but it was such opportunity. And I appreciated that so much. And I do think one of the benefits of the recent update to zoning is that there is no minimum lot size for a given unit, right? And I think that's important, very important, because that doesn't mean anybody is getting forced into a room. But what it does do is it provides freedom to live like that if you want to. And I think that similarly, people should have to not drive a car. Everyone should be able to use a car. But what shouldn't happen is you shouldn't be forced into a situation where you need to be a super commuter or even just a normal commuter if you don't want that. And so I think that policy and zoning is all about giving people choices and opening doors to the possibility that they can live affordably, they can live sustainably if they want, and not force them to live in a giant place that they really don't want to. And so there are any things to keep rents down. I do think that one of the most important ones is adding negotiating power to renters. And that is power. And so when you add some more units in the city, that's more units that really anybody can take. People who are at the top of the market, they can probably outbid everybody else, no matter what the housing looks like, to be perfectly honest. I'd rather have options as a winter.
Thank you. You also wrote that you support you support seeking to legalize mid-rise single-stair housing in Massachusetts. Can you tell us what that means and why you support it?
Sure. This is a state issue, so it's something that we would have to advocate for at the state level. But what it is right now, developers are restricted to providing 2 stairwells for in-size buildings, meaning which be 4 and 6 stories. And this was created as a law back at a time when building materials and the environment were very different. And it was for many different considerations now that are moot. And so there has been research on this that essentially found it has considerable cost to building these types of really missing middle housing that doesn't really yield any benefits. It's no secret to have this one stairwell at all. You know, it's very popular in Europe and in many other places in the world in Spain. So this is just one restriction that I believe should be
Thank you. In your view, how does Cambridge balance the trade-off between historic preservation and the need to build more housing?
But I think this gets to the heart of what public policy is, which is trade-offs. You can't have everything. You can't preserve every building more than 15 years old, for example. And so I think as someone designing, making policy, you have to listen to the community. Every single election for many, many years has yielded strong, the highest priority is housing affordability. We need to listen to that as a priority and really balance it appropriately against other factors.
Sure.
Goose.
So in your response, you stated that your priorities for squares and corridor rezoning would be to identify those squares and corridors with the highest likelihood of attracting affordable and middle market rate developer housing proposals and focus on supporting those projects. What criteria would you use
To identify those areas with the highest emissions.
Part of the real issue here in Cambridge is that there isn't a housing needs study that it.
Just hold it close.
Part of the problem here in Cambridge is that we keep trying to create more housing, but we don't even know what kind of housing we need. There hasn't been a housing needs study to figure out purely what residents here need, what levels are appropriate for that. And so what we need to do is figure out what people need and then figure out where those most likely places are that provide the amenities and conveniences, the transportation, the infrastructure, including water and sewer and all of those things, and open space. We're just shooting dark here by assuming that we need to build 18-story towers. We don't know if that's really the case. Is that what people want at Central Square? There's a lot of other problems in Central Square before you worry about building an 18-story building. So my concern is that we haven't done adequate research and understand what the real housing needs are. The other part of it is that we need to really take a look at studies we already have, but also studies that have been done, and we can bring in some studies that will give us an idea of what the most effective way is for us to build this housing. We pass these laws, we don't set specific goals, and yet we expect developers and financiers to come in and build the housing we want. Why? Why? We haven't held the government, responsible at a home for building units that have costs.
In your intro, you talked about your previous public service in other community and how you used that role to help build more housing or encourage more housing people. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that would apply to serving on the Cambridge City Council?
All right. Well, mainly it was that we developed the housing trust. That is a year-round market rate housing trust. It was the first in the Commonwealth. And what we did is we were able to buy priorities, and we were also able to fund with partners
the development of properties that were specifically targeted into residents of Provincetown and people who work there. That's the other thing that Cambridge is missing. We have preferences, okay? But we don't have money set aside that we specifically target to people who are living here already and working here. And the housing trust is a very important way to do that. The other kinds of things are that we have entered into public-private partnerships with developers who are doing mixed income housing. Not everybody needs to live in our monolithic housing projects. You can have mixed housing, and it may involve people having more relationships and interactions and opportunities to get to know people in other circumstances.
Thank you. Also, you mentioned in your intro, you alluded to the Envision Cambridge goal to 12,500 units in Cambridge. Do you think that is the right goal?
I had no idea. And if have we not a housing study? Envision was done in 2019. That is a very long time, really. In this city, it's a very long time. My concern is that we need to really update our vision about what's happening here. We can't do that without data. We have to know what people's real needs are. And yes, it's going to be tough to make those funding decisions because we're not going to have all the money we've had in the past. And so we are going to have to understand what we need to do. And when we pass laws, we need to make sure that we have goals, that we have specific targets, and that we ask government to reach.
Then finally, in your view, should Cambridge balance the trade-off between historic preservation and the need to build more homes?
I think that will take some additional study. But the fact is that right now, without any guidelines for these neighborhoods and for these buildings, the Historic District Commission and the conservation districts are put in the position of puddling all the political rancor about what these buildings are and where they ought to be preserved. And that is just not fair. The Historic District Commissions have specific guidelines in most communities, and somehow or other, our Historic District Commission has been put in place of being the policeman for all of these projects.
Thank you. Thank you, man. So in your response, you characterize zoning rules before the multifamily housing reforms as incentivizing affordable triple-deckers to be torn down or replaced with larger and expensive single-unit homes. How will the multifamily housing reforms change these incentives?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always use the triple decker that I live in as an example. It's in Cambridgeport, and even though you could technically build multifamily housing in Cambridgeport because of the setback requirements, because of the lot size requirements, what you saw is older triple deckers like the one I lived in being torn down and replaced by multi-million-dollar and large single-family homes because it was just impossible. If the building I lived in caught fire or just the owner decided they were going to tear it down for some reason, it would have been really hard to build a building the same size. We always talk about some of the setback requirements. I can reach out and touch the building beside me if I open my window. If you wanted to replace that, you couldn't have been able to do that. And so what you were seeing were these older, more affordable triple deckers being torn down and replaced by these massive single unit homes that way for $2, $3, $4 million. And so by allowing triple deckers, by allowing multifamily housing, we're going to see fewer conversion down the roof and losing triple deckers and seeing them replaced by large single-family homes.
Thanks. So, if you're reelected to council the next term, we'll continue the conversation around rezoning the squares and corridors with Central Square, North Mass Ave, Cambridge Street. Can you tell us how you would approach that and what would be your top priorities in voting up?
Yeah, I think a big piece is increasing housing and increasing housing affordability. Especially on the corridors, we think of right now Order Square, where you have a G-stop, and then right next to it, you have a massive parking lot and a strip mall-style stores. If you were designing a city today, that is the thing you would be designing, all the places we can have more housing. That is a great area we should be thinking about, as well as the corridor from Order Square out towards Arlington, right? If you think about that stretch of Mass Ave, it's a lot of single-story, two-story. That would be a great place for additional housing. It's great. There's a bus line. There are multiple red line stops. We should absolutely be thinking about more housing there. And I'm also interested in thinking about new approaches. Right now, we have a 20% affordability requirement for inclusionary zoning, and then we have an affordable housing overlay that's 100% affordability. Others talking about social housing. One thing I'm excited about thinking about is a social housing overlay, where you have maybe 80% affordable housing, 20% market rate, and you can get a lot more affordable housing on the corridors by allowing something like that. So it's something I'm also really interested in exploring.
Yeah, but glad you mentioned social housing because I think with the supporter of it actually came up for a few candidates in the previous panel. How would Cambridge pay for that?
Yeah, I think a big part through our affordable housing trust. I have led work on the council along with other folks, including Councilor Zim Siddiqui, to increase the weightage fee. New corporate development, you have so much of in Kendall Square and Alewife, and even with the downturn, we're seeing a new Health Week development. We saw a new biomed project this term. That is something that should be contributing to our affordable housing trust fund to fund both 100% affordable housing as well as social housing. And the exciting thing about social housing is there is no profit. And the money is not going to investors. It is going to maintain and keep the affordable housing. The market rate housing, the market rate component of that, is not going to line the pockets of anyone. It's going to create more affordable housing, help more upkeep, have more green spaces, have more community spaces in those affordable housing. It's a super common model in Europe. We see it in Montgomery County in Maryland. We don't have social housing area in the U.S., and if any place can start it, it's Cambridge. There's funding in the state bill that one of our state reps, Mike Connolly, worked to get in there. We should be taking advantage of that, exploring that right here in Cambridge.
So final question then is, about some other candidates, how should Cambridge balance the trade-off between historic preservation and the need to build more homes?
Yeah, I really don't see these two things in opposition to each other. I've been in an op-ed with Councilor Siddiqui and a couple other councilors about the Harriet Jacobs House. That is an opportunity we have to take a building that was home to a famous abolitionist that is falling apart and increase the access and improve the building, improve public access to it, which there's very little of right now, by adding housing into that. That is a case where we can advance historical preservation and advance housing at the same time. These things don't have to be in opposition one another.
Indeed. You on this council term were the only vote against the multifamily housing reform. Can you explain how you found yourself in such a minority vote?
I can't explain why I was in such a minority, but I could tell you why I made that. I made that vote because I didn't think Burnhouse would result in the production of a toilet faucet.
Louder.
I felt that it would mostly produce luxury units, and that is what we seem to make. Of course, we haven't seen a lot of peanuts produced yet, as it was only passed in February 10th. But that's my concern. I also was concerned because I felt that it incentivized development in our neighborhood, which was like running straight, was completely contrary to Envision Cambridge and its recommendations. And we spent 3 years developing a plan for the city of Envision Cambridge. 5,000 people were engaged in that study. And that study said to put growth along the corridors, in the squares, and in transition districts, which are generally 1 to 2 story industrial buildings and parking lots, often in the edges of main neighborhoods. So I felt like it was problematic focusing on development in the neighborhoods. And then finally, I felt that the hazard right entitlement of the multifamily housing ordinance also was really brutal to abutters. Abutters are finding, if you've been listening to the Cambridge Historical Commission meetings lately, I will tell you they are a source of great trauma. They really are worth tuning into. Neighbors are losing their light. They are losing their gardens. They worry about losing trees. Their solar panels are going to be shaded. And they're losing their privacy. And they have absolutely no recourse. And again, brutal is the word that I think really defines this workings. There are gooder ways to build more housing than the multifamily housing plans.
Thank you. You mentioned Envision, the plan.
Similar question I asked Louise. That plant does stay a goal with 12,500 units. Do you support that goal?
On the previous weeks, I've been asking actually pretty long-term planning with Stephen and I work with Sambal and Burhan in fact for the house and louder. Oh, okay. I've been trying to get a meeting on the calendar to talk about our goals. I think we really have to be assessing who lives in our affordable housing. Who do we want to live in our affordable housing? How large do you want the city to grow? I briefed Louise in 2019 but Cambridge was a very different city. It was before Trump's assault on Cambridge. It was before I worry that, we're going to be losing federal funds and be losing state funds. Our universities are impacted. Our student populations are impacted. Our research institutions are impacted. Our biotech has taken in debt. So I think the demand for housing may have changed since 2019. And I think we need to have a meeting where we're really considering what our goals should be and what is necessary going forward. And then we should plan for those numbers for that.
It do. In the question on the questionnaire around how Cambridge should more effectively govern itself, you said that I would encourage city staff to listen more closely to its informed and often longtime homeowners and neighborhood groups and not be bullied fully by organized groups mostly made up of transient residents. Do you believe that renters and newer residents don't count as much as long-term residents?
No, I knew it was this called this sick displayed it. I just couldn't take it anymore when I'm right for that fly. I want you to know this.
What do you say?
30 seconds. It was a renter once. I worked at the New Zealand Fine Arts as a research assistant. I made 17,000, and I understand why renters would want to live in this incredible community. So I definitely understand the need to build more housing and the need for young people to be able to live in the city. I also understand the need for families to live in the city and city workers to be able to live in the city. So I'm excited to help you to solve this hard. I guess this is it.
Thank you. I appreciate it, candidates. I do see that Mayor Simmons has arrived, and we're figuring out things.
Yeah, come on.
Who do we? I don't. Justin, minute and a half intro, and
I'm going to flip the script. Go for it. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. First of all, I want to thank ABC for doing this forum on housing is an extraordinary important issue in our community. But also what is important, as we all know, we're living into very dark times right now. And unfortunately, those dark times are getting closer and closer to our front door. And so as I was preparing to come over here, I got a call by the situation with one of my families. It's a dire situation. So I apologize for being late, not being here, and not being able to stay. A family that has been ensnared in a fast-evolving situation with ICE was placed in contact with my office just recently, this evening, and just before the forum started, so that's why I was not here. I have knit the city manager in. I will be moving in the city council and city solicitor in the multi-service center and de novo, and we are actively working to assist this family because this is a very dire situation. If you don't act fast, I think one of the parents will be disappeared. I'm not going to be release the family's information at this time. I don't think that will be helpful. It might be detrimental. I am going to ask that you give us space to work with this family, hold it as tightly as you can. And if you're not hearing information coming from City Hall about this, consider the information to be incomplete. Because one thing you don't want is rumors spreading and false information and people reacting or becoming more fearful than we already are. So, as Cambridge always does, we will stand in solidarity. We're working as hard as we can, as fast as we can. We literally have a 2-day deadline to do so. So again, my apologies. It's very good to see you
to my colleagues, I apologize. I'm going to take my leave.